Alright, so in this video we're going to go ahead and try and tackle question number 4. So we've been working at kind of using the we have been working at using the Ricardian trade model to figure out how the US and Canada are going to trade if their economies only produce corn and oil, and they can produce corn and oil in these quantities, and let's just say per year for simplicity's sake. So we got down to Canada has the competitive advantage in oil and the USA has the competitive advantage in corn. So the USA and Canada will trade, and the USA will export corn and Canada will export oil. Then we said that the lowest price the USA is willing to accept is half a ton of oil, and the most that Canada is willing to pay for 1 ton of corn is I just said a ton of oil, is 500,000 barrels of oil. And then the most that Canada is willing to pay for 1 ton of corn is 3 million barrels of oil. So now we're going to go ahead and, before we answer question 4, which is what is the range of all the possible prices that oil will trade in, we're going to go ahead and, instead of doing oil, we're going to go ahead and say what are the possible prices that corn will trade at between the USA and Canada. And we've already established that from question 2 and question 3. So the price of corn is going to be greater than the smallest price the USA is willing to accept. So this will be the price of trade, and I'll put of trade for corn. And it will be less than the most that Canada is willing to pay, which is 3 oil. So all that we really said is that the price of trade is going to be greater than the exporter's opportunity cost, the USA's opportunity cost of producing corn, and it will be less than the importer's opportunity cost of producing corn, which is Canada. So I'm going to say that again. It will be greater than, and I'll write it out also, greater than the exporter's opportunity cost, and it will be less than the importer's opportunity cost. So that's what we would do for question 4 if it said corn. But the reason that I put oil is that I wanted to make us work through this entire thing again for oil so that you kind of get every single bit out of this example that you can. So if we do this for oil, and I'm just going to go ahead and scroll down just a little bit, we see that the USA is going to be the importer and Canada is going to be the exporter. So the USA would be willing to pay up to 2 tons of corn for oil, for 1 million barrels of oil. So we have 2 tons of, 2 tons of corn for 1 million barrels of oil. So this is going to be less than the importer's opportunity cost, and here the USA is the importer. So we're getting that 2 from right here. And then we'll put the price of trade for oil, and then that is going to be greater than the exporter's opportunity cost. And I'll go ahead and work through the logic of why this is true one more time after I go ahead and write it down. So Canada is the exporter, and all we do is we go over here and we see that Canada's opportunity cost of producing 1 million barrels of oil is 1/3 a ton of corn. So this will be 1/3 of corn. And there's our answer. So here's the why one more time, and the most important thing with this is that you do understand the why. So here's why. The USA is willing to pay up to 2 tons of corn for 1 million barrels of oil, because in order to produce 1 million barrels of oil domestically in the USA without trading, the USA would have to sacrifice 2 tons of corn. So if they can get it cheaper abroad, if they can import it for cheaper than what they would have to sacrifice to produce it domestically, then they will be better off and they'll go ahead and do that. Analogously, Canada can produce 1 million barrels of oil for a third Canada has to sacrifice, I lost my train of thought there. Canada has to sacrifice a third a ton of corn in order to produce 1 million barrels of oil. So if they can produce 1 million barrels of oil and then sell it abroad for more than a third a ton of corn, then they'll be better off than what they could do on their own. And we've gone ahead and shown that in prior videos. So as long as the price of oil that Canada is selling at is greater than its opportunity cost, then it will also be better off. So as long as both nations are better off, they'll go ahead and trade. And so we can't say using this model at exactly what price oil will trade, but we can say that it will be somewhere between a third a ton of corn and 2 tons of corn. And that's really all that I want to say with this example. We've really gone through every single kind of thing that you could work with, from opportunity costs up here that I didn't even really ask a formal question about, but we had to start with them to answer other questions, down to competitive advantage here. And then we talked about the prices of trade in 2, 3, and 4. And then, you know what, just really, really quickly, the last thing that I want to say is that Canada has the absolute advantage in the production of oil because 30 is greater than 25. So Canada has the, I'll just write this, where do I really have room? I'll write it over here. Canada has the absolute advantage, AA just stands for absolute advantage, in the production of oil. And then the USA has the absolute advantage in the production of corn, just because 50 is greater than 10. So all that the absolute advantage is saying is who can produce more in using the same inputs. And in this case, it's just the land of that nation and a year's worth of time. So the USA has the absolute advantage in corn, and Canada has the absolute advantage in oil. That's the only thing that was not covered previously in all of these examples. So that's really all that I wanted to do. I hope that that was clear, and if it wasn't, please let me know.